Well, Fox News alert this morning as President Obama is set to unveil his so-called Promise Zones proposal. It's aimed at targeting poverty in several U.S. cities. But before he makes that announcement today, he will meet with several top senators, among them a frequent critic of the president, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul.
The president, is rolling out something called Promise Zones, and they say the sincerest form of flattery is imitation. We're glad that he's read about my economic freedom zones last month in Detroit, and that now he's rolling out these Promise Zones. We don't know yet exactly what that means.
So parts of Senator Paul's home state are being included in the president's Promise Zones. Steve Forbes is the chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media, and he joins me now. Steve, good morning.
Good morning,
good to have you here. So the 5 areas that we understand the president is going to be targeting here are San Antonio, Texas, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, southeastern Kentucky, which is, of course, in Rand Paul's home state, and the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. What do you think of all this?
Well, Jack Kemp had the idea, the late Jack Kemp, 30 years ago on what so-called enterprise zones, and Rand Paul's got an even better version that he unveiled a few weeks ago. And the key thing is not just pouring in more federal money. The key thing is reducing the tax burden so people can rise up and do things in those areas. That means reducing, slashing property taxes. Rand Paul's also proposed reducing income taxes, getting rid of the capital gains tax, the corporate tax. And while we're at it, how about having real choice in education so you get good schools in those areas again? So we know it works, and the key thing is, will the president unveil something that goes beyond throwing more money on projects that really haven't worked in the past and allow entrepreneurs to rise up and resurrect these areas?
I mean, from what we've seen so far, and we're going to get more details from the president today, it looks like, in the tens of millions to fix up urban housing developments that have fallen into disrepair. And we all see examples of those all over. They're very, sad buildings that are in need of repair. Education, more money to be put toward education. And as you point out, there are other options out there. And we've seen in places like Newark, New Jersey, where, the money hasn't made a difference. They spend more money per student there than many places in the whole country, and the numbers are declining. So, it's disheartening. Is it just an effort to say you did something?
The president's unwilling to take on the teachers' unions. We know charter schools work. We have a handful here in New York that work. Now the new mayor wants to get rid of those. We have a handful in Newark and other areas because they have accountability. They work. Parents get more involved. Win-win for everybody except the politicians. So we know it works. And the key thing, again, is reducing the tax burden, regulatory burden. So in terms of housing, if people own their own houses or entrepreneurs are allowed to come in and create affordable housing, as you see in places like Chicago, a lot of these problems would be solved.
I mean, you are a businessman and a successful economist and observer of what goes on in the country. Why do you think that the president, we look at so many things that haven't worked, right? So, is this an encouraging sign that he's going to have lunch or a meeting at least with Rand Paul today? And do you think that he is open to some of the ideas that you and Rand Paul are talking about if he wants to perhaps make it work?
He hasn't been in the past. He's had these charm offensives in the past, and they've always failed because he's unwilling to make any changes. So hopefully today, maybe that's the beginning. New Year's resolution, I don't know. Maybe he will be willing to understand some of these things. But Jack Kemp pointed out 30, 40 years ago, if you reduce the regulatory and tax burden on people, people will do real things. You don't have to have a top-down approach, bottom-up approch. And people from the most...
business people are always looking for a place where there's good opportunity, right? To start a business in a town or a city that is, kind of a low financial entry point for you, where you have a good workforce that's ready to go, and not an onerous regulatory environment that's going to make it hard for you to start a company.
And of course, the whole idea of promise zones or economic freedom zones gets to the whole thing. Why not make the whole USA a promise zone in terms of real tax reform and other regulatory reforms that unleash the entrepreneurial energy in this country?
What's your outlook? When you look at the economy right now in this country and you hear about, this proposal, sounds nice. It might make some people feel like something's going on. But what do you think? What do you think?
Well, the economy, barring a foreign crisis, and there are a lot brewing out there, barring something, a big crisis, the U.S. economy should do well this year compared to the last 4 or 5 years. I think we can break out of the 2% zone, get up to 3%. That's still pathetic by U.S. historic standards, but compared to what we've had in the past 4 years, it's a huge step forward. So that's one reason why the stock market has done well. They sense that something finally is going to be a little better than what we've had in recent times.
What about, Republicans in terms of their economic initiatives? And, some on your side might say, where are they? Where are their ideas about how to really spur growth and get rid of some of these regulations?
Well, Rand Paul's got a good one, and a number of House Republicans have got good proposals in terms of a counter to Obamacare, which is going to become more and more relevant as this thing collapses. Obamacare is the greatest social experiment failure in this country since Prohibition, and I think Republicans do have a number of proposals to step in and deal with this problem.
Steve Forbes, thank you very much.
We'll
see what happens. Another promise. We'll see if this one is fulfilled. Thank you for being here, Steve. Always good to see you.
Good to see you, Martha. Thank you.